Okay, so I know that some of us are struggling with predicting the products of a synthesis reaction. So we're going to look at synthesis reaction predictions. And we're going to focus on just if we have ionic. So we've talked about this in class. So long story short is we're going to do this just the same as before when we looked at formulating an ionic compound when we go with a metal plus a non-metal to give us some sort of ionic compound. And we're going to have to look at what the charges are for everything in the periodic table in order to figure out what our subscripts are going to be. So I'm just going to run through and do some examples. And then I'm going to skip balancing for now, just to kind of focus more on predicting the products. So the first one we got, I'm going to look at potassium plus bromine. So we have a metal, we have a non-metal, so we know we have an ionic compound, so we're going to go with combining the two together. So we have potassium and bromine. And so at this point, we have to figure out what the charges are. And so I find them on the periodic table. You can pause here, find potassium on the periodic table for yourself, find K on the periodic table. So if I look at the periodic table, I find that potassium is in column 1, which means that it has a 1 plus charge. All right. Go ahead, find bromine for me. So bromine is in the 17th column. So bromine has a 1 minus charge. So at the end of the day, I need to see, do I have the same amount of positive charge as I do negative charge? Right? If I do, then I'm done and I'm all set to go. So this one, I'm done and I don't have to mess with any subscripts, which is really nice. Let's take a look at another one and see if maybe we can get one that does require some subscripts. So we're going to look at barium plus, let's go with fluorine. Oops, sorry. And those are diatomic, so I should have had a little 2 there to start. Now, the subscript at the beginning of the problem does not necessarily mean that it's going to have the same subscript at the end. It could, but it doesn't guarantee it. So I'm going to combine them together. So I have barium, Ba, and I have fluorine, F. Sorry about that. And so I have to look and I have to figure out what their charges are. So I find barium on the periodic table. I'll give you a second to do that. So I find barium. Barium's in my second column, which means that barium has a 2 plus charge. Now go ahead and find fluorine. You can pause if you need to. So fluorine is out in the 17th column, just like bromine in our last one. So we have a 1 minus charge. So as I look at barium and I look at fluorine, I'm going to notice that the charges are not balanced. I have 2 positives and only 1 negatives. So to fix that, I'm going to show us our little trick that we've used before. All right. I can move that down over here. I can move this down over here. All right. So I'm going to erase those just so we can have a bit better visual again. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to erase my F. So we're doing a little crisscross there. And so this is going to be a 2 from that yellow, right, from barium's charge. And then I have a 1 for barium, but if I have a 1, we know that the 1 is implied. So I don't have to actually put anything there, right? So we're thinking about there, but a 1's implied, so I get to just drop that out. Right. Let's do another example with some other different charges. This time let's look at Oh, what do we want to go with? Let's go with Ra plus, we'll get creative and we'll go with P, with phosphorus. So we have radium and we have phosphorus. So we know we're going to combine them, radium and phosphorus. So I find radium on my periodic table. You can pause if you need to do that. So radium's out in my second column. So if it's in my second column, we know that it has a 2+ charge. Phosphorus is in my 15th column. So it's going to have a 3-. So we look at it again. Our charges, we don't have the same amount of positive as we have negative. So we got to figure out a way to balance that out. So I'm going to do our little crisscross trick. All right. So the subscript for phosphorus is going to end up becoming that 2. And the subscript for radium, for Ra, is going to end up becoming that 3. At this point, we're done. We could go through, we could balance each of these afterwards. But long story short is we're done with these. Okay. Let's look at one last example just to kind of drive some of our ideas home. So let's look at calcium, and let's look at sulfur. All right. I don't care that sulfur has a subscript of 8 on this side. That doesn't affect my subscripts on my products at all. So we're going to combine them just the same as we've been doing. So we have calcium and we have sulfur. So go ahead and find calcium and sulfur. You can pause the video for a second if you need to. And so calcium is out in the second column, so it has a 2+ charge. Sulfur is in the 16th column, so it has a 2- charge. So I have a 2+ and I have a 2-. I have the same amount of negative charge as I have positive charge. So we're actually done on this one. We only need one of each. They're all balanced out. I don't have to mess with any subscripts. So if they're balanced already, like KBr or like calcium sulfide, right, calcium and sulfur, if the charges are balanced, at this point I'm done, and all I have to do is balance total number of atoms with coefficients like we've been doing. If they aren't balanced right up front, if the charges aren't balanced, like with barium and fluorine, or like with radium and phosphorus, right, with my charges not being balanced, then I can use my little crisscross trick to figure out what my subscripts are. If you can get here and you've been able to do the balancing, then at this point you're all set, ready to go, and the rest of it should be fairly easy, fairly straightforward. If you have questions, stop in, ask me questions, and I'll be glad to help.